Hello and welcome to the Dadless Soul Sessions. It's the 30th of March. My name is Jim Colson, Jim LaSoul. So it says down there, it's not my real surname. That would make me sound a lot more exciting. No, it's Jim Colson. And we do this every month. We meet up with people who have something to say about fatherhood, about manhood, about parenthood, or any of those sort of topics that go around it, things you should be talking to your kids about, things that you could be talking to your kids about, things that your kids might be talking about that you don't understand. We're going to cover all of those things over the months. Today, we have Paul Morgan-Bentley. He is a dad. He has been researching why we are not seen as equal parents in this country at the moment, and whether we are in other countries around the world, and what effect that has on the relationship of the parents with the child, the father with the mother, the father with the other father, whatever your family setup is. And he's done some fascinating research. He's come up with some amazing stuff, and he's a brilliant bloke, and he's on the way a bit later on. You'll hear from him. You've also got Dr. Alex with his conflict management clinic. If you have a conflict management question, then please make sure that you get in contact. Put a little comment into one of the comment boxes on the social media on which this is streaming, and we could answer that a little bit later on with Alex. First of all, though, we are going to chat to Dan, who's the chief guru of Dadless Soul. He'll be talking about what's going on. But first of all, here is a little bit about what we do with our Dads Only meetups. If you've never been to a Dads Only meetups, they happen in Worthing at the moment, but we are hoping to spread them out. They're once a month, and they're just a place where you get to go and get loads of kind of free drinks, free chat, free food, free VR, headset use, and free pool. And you just have a great time finding out what other dads are up to.
Good. Really recommend it. Lots of good guys. Everyone's in the same position with kids. It's having a nice chat. Playing a bit of pool and some VR. Really good. Really recommend it.
Was it nerve-wracking turning up into a place where you didn't know anybody?
Yeah, I was really nervous to be honest. I have pretty bad confidence issues and stuff, so meeting new people and making friends and stuff I struggle with, to be honest. And to be honest, I've come in, I've been pretty relaxed and actually spoken about how I've been and my kids and stuff, so it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it.
So your first experience of VR tonight, what do you reckon?
Oh, it's cool, really cool.
Were you nervous?
Well, yeah, I was at first, but then once I got the hang of shooting zombies, no problem.
So it was very educational.
Oh, good, yeah. For all youth, definitely.
How about you, Dave?
As a keen lover of computer games, that's definitely the way to go forward. But very cool. It was really futuristic. Kind of freaked me out a little bit after I came back out of it. But
a nice new experience?
Yeah, it was really cool. Can't wait to have a go again at some point.
Well, we've got these headsets, and imagine doing it with the kids.
Yeah. My daughter would probably run into a wall.
And let's find out what Dan has to say about what's going on with Dadless Soul. I'm here with the guru, the leader, the boss of Dadless Soul. It's Dan LaSoul. Hello, Dan. How are you doing?
You didn't call me Grandpa Simpson, which you normally do. So
do you know why I didn't?
You've been sued.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. But I've put it in the mail out that's going out today. Says that you're the Grandpa Simpson of Dadless Soul, and I didn't. I wanted to give you a different angle for today. Our dear leader, just like in North Korea.
I'm feeling fresh and revitalised, and not so achy. So hopefully not so much of a Grandpa Simpson.
Right. Okay. What is there a reason for that? Or
I started a day with some hot pod yoga.
Right.
I know you normally do it in the evenings, but I've got I'm going away for a few days over the Easter holidays, so I'm just trying to pack in as much work. And I thought, you know what? I'll get into work and I'll end up cancelling yoga tonight because I'll be stuck in the office. So that's a very bad habit. So why don't you do yoga first thing in the morning, and you'll have no need to, if you do cancel it this evening, you'll still get it done.
Right.
So doing exercise first thing in the morning, big deal for me, mate. Big deal.
Yeah. I mean, I see some people saying that, and they go, I set my alarm an hour earlier.
Yeah.
And I get out there and I go for a run. And I always think, but you've had an hour's less sleep than you could have.
Did you get caught at the weekend with the clocks going forward?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's weird how when the clocks go forward or when they go back, both times it screws you over, and I can't really understand how that happens, but it does. It always seems to be like you get less sleep for some reason. I don't know why.
Children.
Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
They didn't. They used to change it to help, agriculture, which isn't obviously it's a huge industry still, but for many of us don't work on the farms anymore and do need that extra sleep. But kids are potentially selfish and they don't care about stuff like that, do they?
No, in fact, I think that they all get together and think, how are we going to make our parents' lives as difficult as possible with as little sleep as possible? I've come up with a great plan. Let's take it all back to our houses this weekend. Let's really screw them over.
You imagine they probably got like I was going to say a secret WhatsApp group, but WhatsApp's probably quite old for them. So there's probably some subliminal rebellious form of Snapchat in there about the group. Yeah, how to screw up mum and dad this weekend. Ideas welcome.
Yep. And as soon as we infiltrate that, or we won't ever infiltrate it because we're too busy there with our big button phones going, what? Oh, yeah.
And also we're men, so we're not allowed to really infiltrate children's groups.
No, in many ways, frowned upon. So let's not do that.
Give or take a court case.
Exactly. So what is going on with Dad Lasol currently?
Dad Lasol is in full control. We got some exciting things coming up. Obviously, we had for those that know, we had the wonderful Gramsci back, becoming a sort of in-house resident freestyle rapper. He came and did a wonderful session at the Worthing Playdate. So I don't know if you've seen the videos on social. If you haven't, you should go and check them out because that gives a brand new version of story time.
Gramsci is our in-house rapper. I could try and do it, but I'd be crapper.
Moving swiftly on.
Okay.
Lucky this isn't live.
Yeah.
We've got some stand-up comedy gold with our good friend Aidan Goatley, who I'll be seeing tonight, actually. So Aidan's previously done a lot of our sort of dad and kid workshops. He's done the Edinburgh Festival, stalwart of the sort of UK comedy scene, and he's going to join us now at our dad only meetups, where I think on the 20th of April he's going to give us a private stand-up show, but then start doing Q&As. So this is for people that want to up their dad joke quality. So he's not going to be doing stand-up comedy workshops. This is more about creative writing. So as you know, Dad Lasol, we're all about having some very difficult conversations. How do you broach those? Add a little bit of humour in there. So Aidan's got to be on hand so we can bring our worries and our stresses to you there and maybe start having some new conversations and some very, very good dad jokes. First session of that is April the 20th. April the 21st, which is a Friday night. We've got Norman J, the legendary funk and soul DJ, is coming down to Worthing Play. And on that bill is one of our lovely chaps, Chris Leach, who's almost giving birth to the Dad Lasol DJ crew. So we'll be on the same bill as Norman J. So there will be a discount available, a little discount code. So anybody wants to come out for a bop with us. So that's really nice. We're chatting to our friends at Audio Active. So they're the group that come in and do our rap and beat workshops with us, about putting on a joint event for Father's Day weekend. So like a big family function. So more news as it develops. What else we done a few podcasts. So I was on a wonderful thing called Tea with Change Makers. So if you hit the socials, the link's on there. And that was a really interesting talk about men's mental health and maybe the barriers that are there and why they need to change and what happens if they do change them. We're back with Sam Delaney, our lovely author friend, for Club Reset, but I think you need to subscribe to his channel. That's a special one for the people that give him money regularly.
You can listen to your other one you did with him for free, though. If you don't want to give Sam Delaney money, but I don't know why, what's wrong with you? Cool.
Yeah,
Put your hand in your pocket, give Sam a couple of quid.
Yes, yeah, it's well worth it. His book, Mental Health Without the B Word, is sort your head out. Really, really good read, and an even better audio book if you have Audible. I listened to a couple of times. What else? Some very interesting meetings, but not very interesting because I can't really talk about them. So it makes great radio. But yeah, I just want to say big up to Sam Thomas. So Sam Thomas is our friend that runs Sussex Business Times magazine. He does a wonderful podcast himself where he interviews different business leaders and creative souls. And last night he did a live event where he interviewed Omar, Brit Soul, sensation. So I went down to see that being recorded, and really, really lovely event. And I had a quick chat with Omar afterwards about maybe coming on to us, because his big song that probably everybody will know would be "There's Nothing Like This." So if you'd like to sing that, Jim.
There's nothing like this.
There's nothing like kids. This is the version that we're going to be doing. So hopefully we'll get Omar on as a guest. What do you got? The next Worthing play date is Nerf Wars. So we're back in the woods with the Outdoors Project, dads versus kids. So for anybody who wants to embrace it in a Rambo, paint across there, running across the hedges and shooting kids. But it'd be very different, wouldn't it? Because in our day, we used to find odd things in hedges down parks.
Yeah, and that's that's a sad time. They say progress is all good, but that is one reason why it's not, I think.
It is. Well, hopefully there will be none of those for our children to find, because
I suppose it makes it less awkward when you're running a play date, I guess. So okay, fine.
It does, but didn't we? The police have come to get me for our terrible jokes in the background. If you look through the archives, we did have the very interesting conversation with the lady from St Martin's College of Art about how to talk to kids about pornography on a serious subject. So yeah, there's lots of things coming up. There's some really lovely summer events, but we're still putting pen to paper, and then I'm going to scribble them all down, chuck them at Jim, and Jim's not going to have a clue what they mean, but then he's going to have to sort it all out for me. So yay, Jim.
I'll just write it in a way that seems to make sense, but it doesn't, that's how I live my life. That's basically my job.
Yeah. So lots of good stuff. I would definitely recommend the Norman J event for a bit of a bop, and having Aidan as a sort of a regular feature now doing creative writing as part of the Dads Only meetups, I think is going to add a real different chamber to how we have these difficult conversations. And you're going to see these dozens of fellas that have now really upped their dad joke game all over Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that.
Yeah, because we do talk about the power of words a lot, and it's true, it really is. And Aidan is someone that's his entire working life is working to find the right words to say and the right way to phrase things. And so if any of that can rub off on you, then that is going to be another great reason to go to the Dads Only meetups as well, isn't it?
And you imagine having a private stand-up show, because with the cost of living and stuff, it's tough to get your pocket money to go and spend on nice things. But as we're nice people, we make it all part of the fun. And so don't worry, at any Dad Soul events, if things are tight, there are free tickets available on a no questions asked basis. So you can have a free beer from the Unbarred Brewery, meet some new pals, watch some stand-up comedy, and maybe have a little bit of event if that's what will make you feel better.
Exactly. And if you like the idea of private stand-up shows, then when I took my show to Edinburgh back in the year 2000, it was basically every night was a private stand-up show for the 3 audience members who turned up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Did it sell out, Jim? Is that what you said?
No, it sold out. That's the problem. And was reviewed in the Scotsman newspaper as a pointless shambles.
That's got to be on your headstone, hasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Jingles. A pointless shambles of a man.
100%. I will be putting that. I mean, I think it's on my LinkedIn, but we'll see. Should be.
Okay, talking about things on headstones, I saw this. You know, you get those little badges on benches for people that have passed away. I saw one the other day. Something like, "Dear Alan, Shane, you were just getting interesting."
That's amazing. That's really good. Well done.
Yeah.
All right.
So who we got on
We
tonight?
have got Alex very soon with his amazing kind of conflict management workshop. He'll be here to answer your questions and to let you know the best ways to manage that conflict. And then Paul Morgan-Bentley, who's here, who's written this book, The Equal Parent, and he's going to be chatting about what he's found. He's done all this research. So he's gone and talked to people across the world and found out how dads are treated around the world, what benefits there are for really pushing to be seen more as an equal parent, because you'd think that we would be already. It's 2023. Yeah. However, spoiler alert, we're not. So he's got more on that. Fascinating stuff to talk about a little bit later on the Dadless Soul Sessions. Dan, thank you very much.
Pleasure as always, Jim.
So yeah, that was Dan. Dan Lassalle, our guru, Grandpa Simpson leader, and Emperor, I think, is the latest one that he wants to be called. Paul Morgan-Bentley is on the way very soon. But first of all, it's time for that part of the month, which I look forward to because it's a chance for me to learn a lot. It is the unflappable Alex. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine. As I said, fine. I've outside chance I've got COVID, but apart from that, absolutely all right.
Well, I'm glad you're okay. I'm sorry that you might have COVID, but remember, it is actually just an upper respiratory tract infection caused by a virus, a mutation of which we've had around for donkey's years, long before we got worried about it.
Yeah, good excuse to not go out and meet people, though, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Alex, you're here once again for our conflict management. I'm going to say workshop. I like that idea. Yeah. We've had some questions in. Would you mind answering the questions of the great British public?
Absolutely. I'll give it my best shot. And as always, this is just my opinion. People are very free to disagree with me and frequently do. But it is, to say, it's just a viewpoint. And if it helps one person, then it's been worthwhile.
Perfect. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes that's just what you need. You just need that starting off point, someone to give you a suggestion, and then you can kind of build your own response based around that. It's just a starting point, really. If anything.
Exactly.
So the first question, this is a big one. How do you argue with a narcissist? They refuse to listen to my point of view and can never see how their actions have affected me. Where are we going with that one?
Right. Well, first up, this is a word I hate pronouncing because I frequently get it wrong. Narcissistic personality disorder, which I will now refer to for the rest of this session as NPD, because it's easier to say, actually is a mental health condition. Yeah. And it is a recognizable and diagnosable mental health condition. So I don't know if this person's partner has that actual diagnosis or whether it is a home-brewed diagnosis. But for anybody who doesn't know or doesn't quite understand what it means, it's simply that people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was interesting you referred to Dan as Emperor. I'm not saying anything here at all. They need and seek too much attention, and they want people to admire them. Dan can rest assured I do admire him. But people with this disorder, and this is the important bit, may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others. So often people who say that so-and-so is a narcissist, they don't actually appreciate that actually that person might not even realize that's what's going on, that's what's happening. Yeah. Mm. If you're in a narcissistic relationship, it is always going to be problematical. It's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be challenging. But what you need to do is you need to recognize that actually there is a large amount of fragility in that narcissist's self-esteem, because if you, as the other half of that relationship, will put up with a certain amount of, I don't want to use the word abuse because that has other connotations, and we're not necessarily going down that route at all with this, but a certain amount of trouble, shall we say, then they don't feel confident enough in their own in themselves to set boundaries, yeah, or to be more dominant in themselves, yeah. What you need to do is you need to try and develop your own self-confidence, self-worth by learning to practice self-compassion. I'll just say that again. Develop your own self-confidence and self-worth by learning to practice your self-compassion. Yeah. Don't be a victim. And again, I'm conscious of the word victim. It's not necessarily the best term to use, but don't be on the receiving end and do nothing about it. Yeah. But you must, in all the encounters, everything you do, be equal, act equal, treat your partner as an equal. Yeah. Has that given you any ideas?
That's
it's a bit heavy.
It's
quite
heavy.
A heavy first question.
It really is, isn't it? And it's fascinating. That's what I really find interesting about it, because that is a heavy, whether it, as you say, whether it's an actual diagnosis or whether it's something that this person has assumed. It's it's a big old thing to work with, and it's one of those things where, is there any chance that's going to ever change, or do you have to change kind of too?
With most mental health disorders, back in the 60s and the 70s, when Prozac, I was going to say Viagra. I don't mean Viagra. Valium, that's the one. Sorry, it's been the end of a very long day. Valium, Prozac all came out onto the market. It was going, yeah, great, this solves all our mental health problems. It doesn't. It actually created more than it probably solved, to be honest. I hate using those drugs and don't use them at all often. But the biggest treatment for many mental health conditions is actually about communicating and talking. And I've got that C word, communication, in there. I get it in every single week, or every single month rather. It is so important. But yeah, it's about the fact that if you think your partner is suffering with NPD, then try and get them help in the same way that you would if they're suffering with depression, if they're suffering with anxiety, or any of the other mental health conditions that are out there and affecting us all at the moment. Yeah, they need help. And you, as a layperson, may not be the best person to do that. You are, however, if you're in a relationship with them, the best person to support them through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you are playing Dadless Soul Sessions bingo, then you can tick off communication. That's it. You've got that. And also, Alex, you do actually prescribe things for people, don't you? So please do not mix up Viagra and Valium.
No, it's fine. I don't. It's just, I say, the end of a long day, and I just went blank. I was thinking diazepam, which is the generic name. Valium is the trade name that we don't ever use anymore. Yeah. And I was just getting confused. A bit like sildenafil is Viagra.
Right, is it? Oh, there we go.
Sildenafil is the generic name. Viagra is the trade name. Other companies make sildenafil now, and if you get it on the NHS, you won't get Viagra because it's too expensive. You'll get the cheap knockoff copy.
Wow, this is a learning experience. We've gone off conflict management, but we're still learning. Second question. I'm dreading seeing my in-laws over Easter. They continually belittle me and make it obvious their daughter could have done better. Problem is the kids are going to notice it soon, and my wife doesn't want to confront her parents about their actions. What can this person do?
The first thing is they've got to discuss it with their wife. Yeah. Because, to use an old expression, united you stand, divided you fall. That she's got to be, because sorry, the question did say wife, didn't it? So I'm not being gender incorrect. She's got to actually sit down with her husband, and they've got to go through it, and they've got to say what's wrong, what's good, what is the problem. They've got to sort that between themselves, first of all, and then probably set some rules and boundaries in their own home. So when the in-laws come to stay or come for the day, they're in your home, they abide by your rules. You know, if I walk into someone's house and it's a strictly shoes off at the front door house, I take my shoes off. Yeah. If it's a house where they don't worry about it, then I don't worry about it. Yeah. So it's normal common courtesy to follow the rules of the house, but those rules have got to be clear and defined and agreed by the people who live there. Yeah. So then she is probably, without her husband, got to sit down with her in-laws and say, look, this is what you're doing. You may or may not like him. You may or may not think he's good enough. But bottom line is, he's the father of your grandchildren, and we're in a relationship together and we're staying together. So actually, she needs to lay down some rules about what they can and can't do. Because the bottom line is, they probably adore their grandchildren, adore their daughter. They don't want anything coming between that and them. And if they're told straight out that their actions are going to cause that, then they may well change. There's no guarantee. There's never any guarantees in life. But you should always make sure that the husband and wife have each other's back. They must at all times. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but he's going to have to talk to his wife and say, you've got to sort this out with them, but we'll do it together. But ultimately, you've got to just talk to them, because if I'm there, it's liable just to inflame it simply because they have that toxic relationship, for want of a better description.
It's like a chain of awkward conversations you got to have there. You've got to have that with her, and she's got to have that with her parents. But
then you've all got to be together in the triangle and try and have it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's got to be done. I mean, I always worry when people say for the sake of the kids, because I just think actually you don't want to create a situation to try and protect the kids that invariably the kids will see straight through. It is about actually the fact that if they want to have a relationship with their grandchildren, they've got to have a positive relationship with their son-in-law. Yeah, simple as that. The two come as a package. Grandchildren and son-in-law, they're a package.
And I guess sorting it out as well. The impression I got from the question was that the kids were getting older and more perceptive, and so sort that situation out before they do see through it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to have that strength of character to stand up. And this will go back and without wishing to sound all Freudian, it will depend on her relationship as a child with her parents as well.
Right, third question. My youngest is super competitive, basically makes playing board games and other games a miserable experience. If she doesn't win, she runs off and cries. How do I help her be a better loser?
Okay, if you want a bit of a laugh for a moment, I was doing some research on this particular question, and 2 out of my 3 kids wandered past and looked at my screen and went, "We're not overly competitive with each other, Dad." And I went, "No, it's not about that. It's to do with Dad LaSalle." And they really got mortified that I thought they were overly competitive with each other. Bear in mind, they're 18 and 16. You get an idea. Anyway, how can you get a child to be competitive, but in a healthy way? Well, Jim, you and I are just about of the generation where in school they sort of took competition out because they said it was unhealthy. Now competition's back in again in school because they've realized that actually it's natural, it's normal human instinct, and it is healthy, but it has to be managed. So you need them to channel their passion. Yeah. So if your child is playing, I don't know, Snakes and Ladders, probably something no child plays these days, but I used to play it. And you just gone down that snake. It's, make a joke out of it, make it a laugh. It's funny. It's chat, take that anger and twist it round into something else. Make a joke about the fact that the snake's got a really slippery back. I don't know, just as an example. Yeah. So try and get them to channel it somehow. Yeah. You do need to lead your child. That's really important. Yeah. As parents, we are leaders, whether we like it or not. Yeah. From the moment that little bundle of joy pops out into the world, we are leading that child, potentially in their eyes, if it's a good relationship, for the rest of your life. You're going to be their leader, although you may step more to the side as they get older. Yeah. Positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement. So when they do something right, really go for it, almost, you know, to the point of being overkill on it, and appreciate them for doing it. So Snakes and Ladders example, when they've gone up that ladder, this time you really make a big deal about it, and that's great. But also with their younger brother, older sister, whatever it might be, treat that child exactly the same, so they get the same reinforcement. Yeah. This is one that I thought about long and hard, as it was something that my own dear late father taught me. Teach them how to lose gracefully. That is really difficult. So when they do lose, you've got to show them that sort of unconditional love and support. Yeah. And literally, metaphorically, wrap them in cotton wool and make them feel special. Yeah. Not because they lost, but because they are your son, your daughter. Yeah. So that will help to try and reinforce the fact that actually when you do lose, it's not a bad thing. Yeah. Putting things into perspective, widening their horizon. Is it sensible to be, you know, just totally focused on this one tiny game? Or actually, right, we've done the game. You lost, you won, whatever happened, we move on and we do something else. Don't leave it to fester. Yeah. Obviously, if they do something bad, wrong, call it out. Yeah. And at the start of the game, get them to think about what they want to achieve. You know, they want to win. Yeah. But do you also want to have a good time? Do you also want to have fun? Do you want to have a laugh? Yeah. And lastly, try not to push too many things onto your child. Let them have their own life. Yeah. It's something that we're all guilty of. I've been guilty of with my 3 children. They, you know, I want them to do certain things. I've made them do certain things. You know, most of the time it's not backfired on me. Yeah. But sometimes it has. And as they get older, you have to realize that you have to actually let them walk, fall over, pick themselves up and carry on again. You can't always be holding on to the scruff of their neck so that they don't fall over.
Mm-hmm. So plenty to go on there.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit long-winded.
No, that's great. That's really good. That's why we do what we do. That's why we do this section, isn't it? Alex, I'm amazed that you still have like different stuff to say every time.
Well, I try to, you know, I mean, eventually the questions might start to recycle, in which case my answers might start to recycle. But in the meantime, I'll keep coming up with the fresh stuff as I can.
Well, for now, we'll keep going with it. Thank you, Alex, once again. Invaluable stuff. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
See you, Jim.
Very soon, we're going to be talking to Paul Morgan-Bentley. He's the journalist who's written this book called The Equal Parent, which explores why men aren't seen as equal parents and how we can get to that stage and what happens around the world. Fascinating stuff. He'll be here after this.
This is a place where you can come with your kid, you can have that moment where you just have a little time. I mean, we've had dads that have sat there and had their kids on their laps and realised, you know what, I've not been able to do this in weeks.
Unfortunately, there's 84 men a week under the age of 45 being lost to suicide every week in this country. And it's because men are not set up to talk. And what we do is bring them all together and allow them to have a really open conversation. So we've now got 2,500 members, 8 different countries.
What did you think of the event today?
I thought it was really good. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
And Mo did as well. We've been playing with the Lego and the tents and the tubes and all sorts of stuff. So,
brilliant.
Yeah, it's been a good morning out.
I mean, Plus X is fantastic. It's such a nice space and such a good way to bring the community together. We're really grateful to be able to have this space to be able to do this.
And for us, it's a really great opportunity to give back to the local community whilst also supporting dads and male carers who may be isolated and want to get better support from their local community.
And the most important question I like asking absolutely everybody, but will you recommend Dad and the Soul?
I do, I will, and I'll continue.
Next up on the Dad La Soul sessions, it is Paul Morgan-Bentley. Paul, hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Now, you are the head of investigations at the Times, is that right?
That's right.
And also now, parenting author.
Yes, so I've written a book as well called The Equal Parent, and it's all about societal changes and how dads can and should be seen as equal parents. And in a world that we kind of expect equality at work, why is there no expectation of equality at home?
And so you've written an article that we've had on our website about this, which is fascinating. It sort of goes back to the moment you realised, I guess, was it that kind of not all parents are seen as equals?
Yeah, well, it was an experience that my husband and I kind of couldn't escape from when we became parents. So my husband Robin and I became parents to our son Solly 3 years ago. He was born through surrogacy, and we just continually face this experience of this kind of low expectation of fathers, or kind of an NHS website that gives advice to new fathers, and the expectations were so low, and saying things like, you know, if you just had a child, you know, don't worry, you may cry, this is natural, really kind of patronizing stuff. But also, you may be expected to help out the mum occasionally. So, you know, it's a good idea to be around in case there are no relatives or friends there to help. And I just, as well as it being really patronizing and annoying, that kind of advice, I also felt like it really doesn't reflect the reality of people's lives now. Kind of spoke to a previous generation of father. And men are usually now expected to do much more, should be doing an equal amount when it comes to childcare and looking after their own children. But the expectation, or the way that kind of dads are talked about, is in either this really kind of patronizing, kind of, are you babysitting today kind of way, or full of praise and like, oh, you're such a brilliant hands-on dad when you do really basic things. And so that experience, we kept having it, and it kind of formed the idea for the book.
And so it seems strange that the NHS would be like this, because they're normally very careful to be really inclusive, but this sounds really exclusive. It sounds, as you say, it's like an old generation thing, isn't it? It's that low expectation that they have of dads just doesn't sit right in 2020, I guess it was when you did that, and 2023 now.
Was part of the book something I wanted to go right to. I wanted to start the book, the first chapter, from the first night of children's lives, babies' lives. And I did freedom of information requests to all hospital trusts, because there's no national policy when it comes to this. And most hospitals in the UK kick dads out after their babies are born. They're treated like visitors. And in some cases, that means them only being allowed to be in hospital for an hour every day. And kind of take a step back, if a woman had an accident and lost loads of blood, or had emergency surgery for anything else, there'd be an expectation that a partner would be there, or a parent or someone to support her. And yet you have a child, and it's such a formative moment, and the mum often has gone through all of that, has lost loads of blood, you know, and you should be there as a dad. Dads want to be there. They're there for the birth now. They're not in the pub having a cigar. You know, overwhelmingly dads are there, and yet they're treated like visitors. And so, you know, I wanted to explore that, and why that happens, and if that happens across the world, but also look at the science, and, you know, how important it is that dads have those formative moments with their kids. And really, obviously, biology is important, and women are pregnant and give birth to babies. But really, the moment that a child is born, that should be reset. If the mum's happy to share it with a partner, then that's the opportunity for dads to really step up and, you know, and be there and hold their babies and help feed them and burp them and change them and all those things. And yet dads are often kicked out.
So where are there places in the country that are better than others, did you find?
Yes, what I found was that basically lots of hospitals in the UK were built by a kind of previous generation that didn't perhaps expect dads to want to be there or to be expected to be there. But now, and you know, when I was born, my mum was in hospital for about a week, even though there were no kind of obvious problems. The hospitals had the capacity to look after mums in that way. Now often people are expected to leave after 6 hours, and yet at the same time, you don't have dads being accommodated. So in older hospitals, there's just no space for dads often. There are open wards, and there are concerns about safety of other women, and that obviously should be paramount. And what's happening now is when new hospitals are built in the UK, there's one in Northumbria, there's a new one, a big one being built in Leeds, that there was an announcement about a couple of years ago, and they're being built with private rooms for free for everyone that gives birth, so that you do have that space to form your first kind of moments as a family together, and dads won't be kicked out. So things are changing, but they're very slow. And in other parts of the world, typically kind of Scandinavia, Nordic countries, they have been doing this for a while, and it's seen as really, really beneficial.
I noticed between my eldest and my youngest, so my eldest is 9, my youngest is 6, and in that, for my eldest, I was kicked out after an hour. It had been a very long labour, kind of quite traumatic, and then it was, oh well, they're going to bed, see you later, you go home. It was dazed and confused.
And how did that feel?
It was awful. It was awful because we'd been through this experience, and obviously pain wise a lot worse for my wife, but it would be made easier by having me there and being able to be there. And I was just sent away. And I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, in fact, throwing the ball for the dog, just thinking, why am I here? Why am I in this situation? Why am I not there? And obviously raring to get back for the first moment that I possibly could the next morning. Thankfully, for my second child, they were accommodating. There was a bed there. It wasn't a very comfortable bed, but at least it was a bed, and I was able to be there for a bit longer. But so I guess that's some progress there anyway.
And also, I do think that rightly, the women are the focus. They have been through childbirth, and rightly services check up on them afterwards and check in with them, with the baby as the focus, but also the mum as she's suffering from any kind of mental health repercussions from the birth, and that's really, really important. And so far, that doesn't happen for dads. Often the only interaction with the dad is a quiet word with the mum to make sure that he's not abusive. But actually, no one checks in with the dad. There's no focus on the dad at all. And it wouldn't take very long to check in with the dad. But actually, from speaking to lots of new dads and friends, I think there's a massive problem with dads having undiagnosed PTSD often after birth. And obviously, they haven't gone through it. But when there's a sudden emergency and they're standing there and thinking, my partner and this baby are both going to die, or they're losing lots of blood, and they're standing there, that's a really traumatic thing to go through. And yet you're just expected to go back to work after 2 weeks, and it's like nothing's happened to you.
And that even continues sort of over the next year or so, when, I mean, we do know that men get postnatal depression. That is certainly possible. But once again, I mean, I certainly don't think anyone checked up on me. And it's sort of one of those things where we don't really talk about it that much. It's something that comes up at Dadless Soul sessions where we get people together to talk about it. But in a wider context, you kind of feel a little bit left out there. And that's the thing. It's even if the birth went fine, there's certain parts of your life when you go from not having a child to suddenly having a child, having lack of sleep, having that responsibility on top of you that everyone feels, all parents feel, and that can be quite trying for dads as well. But once again, as you say, there's no one around really to ask about it.
And there are certain kind of local campaigns in the UK that are trying to change this. One of the things we found, so we came to parenthood in a slightly different situation to lots of people, which is that we're a straight couple. And, it's still a real minority when it comes to parents. Sorry, a gay couple, gay male couple. And because there was no woman, we had our son through surrogacy. We're still very close with the surrogate, Rachel. It wasn't her egg, so she's not genetically linked to our son. But after she gave birth, we then went through a legal process where even though Solly was with us from birth, we had to go through a legal process to transfer legal parenthood. And even after that, even now, sometimes we get calls from health services saying, "Hi, is that Rachel?" And they get very confused when a man answers. And then when we what we discovered is we've tried to put both of our names, mine and my husband's names, down on our son's on our son's record. It's there on his kind of the new birth certificate he has, but on the NHS systems, they keep coming back and just saying, well, we only usually list one person, and that's only ever usually the mum. And I spoke to the Fatherhood Institute, an organisation that campaigns on these issues, and they discovered the same thing, that NHS records still only link babies to mums routinely. And what that means is it's really hard for services to help dads, because if you've got a dad that comes into his GP and has PTSD or has kind of certain or things are going wrong, there's no way of them automatically linking that to, oh, there was a traumatic birth 6 months ago. And it would help everyone to have those records linked. The vast majority of dads just want to do a really good job and be as supportive as possible and take responsibility as dads. But even in the awful cases that services are worried about, when there's a risk because there's an abusive dad, they should want to know about that. You know, the more information, the better. And yet there's this really old-fashioned way of working where it's just this reinforcing that you have a baby and the responsibilities, the mothers and the dads are just expected to be an occasional help. But that's not how people are living their lives anymore. And it's also not fair, because if we want equality at work and we want women to be seen as equals at work, we have to see dads as equals at home. And that means not patronizing them, but it means linking them to the records. It means when a school's got a problem, they can call the dads, because mums usually always get the calls. And it means dads also kind of stepping up domestically and taking proper equal responsibility at home.
Do you think this is also why shared parental leave is still a slow burner, I guess?
It's really interesting because shared parental leave in the UK is supposedly equal. You know, you've got a block of time and you can share it half-half if you want. But actually, I've realized it only really massively benefits gay male couples, you know, because we could just split it down the middle. There's no societal pressure telling us we're a bad mother or, you know, bad parent for not taking the whole year. And as dads, we don't feel, I think lots of dads can feel like they're stealing the time from their partner if they share the leave, and that she's been pregnant and given birth and she's always imagined a year off with the baby, and so they're somehow taking away from her. And we didn't feel like that. And so actually it doesn't work. And when you look at other countries, the ones where the take up by dads is much higher, where it's really worked, are the Scandinavian countries, where they have use it or lose it leave. And essentially they'll have a mum gets an allocation and a dad gets an allocation. And if you don't take your allocation, you lose it. And when they do that, now, for instance, in Iceland, a third of all parental leave is taken by dads. And a generation ago, dads were taking no parental leave. And if you think about it, it's amazing. In one generation, a new generation of babies in Iceland is having months of dedicated time with their dads. That's amazing. And that's the power of a policy change.
Because that the kind of 2 weeks traditional paternity leave is that's just like a batten down the hatches. Oh my goodness, there's a new child in there. It's less, you know, there is some quality time, but to be able to have that time as they're growing and as they're becoming more conscious of things happening is you know, that would be surely more beneficial, wouldn't it?
It's mad when you think about it. We're so used to it as a kind of concept, is going back after 2 weeks paternity leave. But again, imagine there was an accident. You know, if your partner had had some serious road accident, your boss would probably say to you, take the time you need. You wouldn't be being called after 10 working days and saying, where are you? And yet you have a baby, and this isn't some kind of personal indulgence. You have a baby, and that's the next generation of people. It's like everything that matters in the world. And also in a kind of, looking at it from a kind of purely economical kind of viewpoint, that's our next generation of workers. It's important for society. And yet that happens, and you're just expected to kind of plod through as if nothing's changed.
And does this change as a baby grows up, as a child grows up? Have you found anything gets more equal, or more equal, gets closer to being equal? Or
I think there are real opportunities. I think kind of understandably, lots of women will say things like, but how can I share it if I'm breastfeeding? And the official advice is to breastfeed for 6 months. And obviously lots of women don't breastfeed, but if a mum's breastfeeding, it makes it really hard to share. Something I've kind of found in writing the book is that a real opportunity for dads is weaning. And we found this. So I took the first 6 months off work, and I was doing all the kind of bottle feeds and, you know, trying to get them sleeping through the night and stuff like that. And I definitely felt more of that responsibility in that time, even though we were trying to do it as equally as possible. But then from 6 months, Robin took over, my husband, and he did weaning, and he really kind of took charge of it. And I got involved a bit, but he was deciding what meals and all that kind of stuff. And still 3 years on, I can see how those responsibilities have kind of carried on. So I definitely still worry more if Solly's in the car and it's 5 o'clock and he's nodding off. I start to panic that he's not going to go to sleep later and our evening will be ruined. And yet Robin is the one that does the online food shop and definitely worries more about what he's eating and stuff like that. And actually milk feeding, whether by breast or bottle, doesn't last very long, But loads of dads cook now. We live in 2023. It's not the kind of 1950s anymore. And actually, if you have real confidence in cooking for your kids, that's an area of responsibility that actually you can take on forever. And it's interesting because like the best-selling weaning book when I was with Solly as a newborn baby was Joe Wicks's one, and you have all these kind of the food shop stuff, the Ella's Kitchen and stuff, which was developed by a dad. And I think it is a really kind of nice opportunity for dads to step up and take control, because breastfeeding is brilliant in lots of ways, but it's also excluding for dads.
I mean, the problem with taking control at weaning, though, is that the nappies become much, much worse.
I don't know. I found the first 6 months yellow nappies really weird.
Okay, yeah. I like how they always, in all the official guidance, they liken it to food as well. So it'll look like pesto for a while. And I did not eat pesto for a long time after
Tar
that.
and then pesto and then mustard.
Yeah, there you go. That's the food scale, I guess. Yeah.
But even when dads in straight couples want to do things equally, and even when women want to do things equally, and even when women earn more than men and the man's doing more at home, there are so many pressures from society that try and stop that happening. And that's part of my book, The Equal Parent. Partly it's about what you can do at home, but and that perspective from a gay male couple, because freed of society's expectations, we could split things equally. But also it's about all the different institutions in society that have to change. So, you have loads of stories that always come out, usually on social media, with mums complaining that they have a high-powered job and they've told the school countless times, call the dad, he's much more flexible than I am, he works from home. And yet every time they call the mum. And there's this kind of inherent suspicion of dads, I think. Or if, I interviewed someone who was telling me that every time her husband picked up the kids from nursery, if there was an issue, they'd give him a note that said, for mum. But they both worked, and that nursery worker is, I'm sure, well-intentioned, but there's just this suspicion of dads, even when we're doing it, and that has to change.
Yeah, I noticed when I came back, I picked him up from nursery one Friday when we were going away, and I think that my son had been excitedly telling them about it. And the nursery worker said to me, "Oh, you're in charge this weekend, are you?" It's like, well, yeah, because I'm a parent, so I'm in charge every weekend.
Yeah.
But the obvious implication there was, of course, oh, you've been allowed to look after the children.
Yeah, time to babysit.
Yeah.
The house is going to be a wreck.
Yeah.
And you know what? There is this narrative in society about the useless dad. And you see it as like, daddy pig who breaks everything and is useless and can't get anything right. And you do get that. And that's part of the praise thing. Because if then people see a dad doing anything that isn't remotely crap, then they're like, oh, you're such a hands-on dad. You're so brilliant. Actually, I don't think it helps anyone to patronize dads or to treat us like idiots, because then it just reinforces this idea that we don't care and that we're just helping out. And actually, dads are perfectly capable of caring and nurturing and taking responsibility. And actually, as part of the book, I looked into the science of it. You hear a lot about mother's instinct. I wanted to know if that's true. And actually, the science is really good on this now. And there is no reason biologically that dads can't do all of this. And first, to get into the kind of weeds of it, the first thing is oxytocin is the bonding hormone. And they've measured that in new mums, and there's a rush of oxytocin through pregnancy and childbirth. And that's partly why there's this assumption that mums bond more intensely with their babies. But actually now, scientists have measured those levels in new fathers. And as long as you're interacting with your baby all the time, the levels of oxytocin go up so high, they're as high as new mothers. But it's all about actually doing it and being around. And absent fathers don't get this rush. But if you're there and you're holding your baby, and you're having those moments and you're looking after them, that hands-on stuff, you get the rush of oxytocin that's as deep as new mothers get. And then there's another question that scientists have tried to answer to do with waking up at night. So I think lots of people, I don't know if you can relate to this, but lots of people say the mum tends to wake up first at night when the baby cries. And it's all to do with responsibility and that sense of kind of panic when the buck stops with you. And when they scan new mums' brains, there's a part of the brain that's all to do with kind of responding and anxiety and panic and urgency. And that was 4 times the size in new mothers compared to new fathers. And the scientists kind of seem to think this was this was the mother's instinct that they'd found. But actually, they then scanned gay dads who'd had kids through surrogacy, and the primary caregiver, whoever that was, their brains looked like new mums. That part had also quadrupled. And that's not because gay men are somehow special. It's because there was no woman there. It's all about that feeling of the buck stops with you, which is why I think kind of sharing parental leave, if you can, is really important, because it's that feeling. If you're lying in bed and you think somewhere subconsciously, that she'll get up first, you might feel a lot of responsibility, but you don't get the full weight of responsibility.
So it's like a chicken and egg thing then. So that happens to the brain because that person is seen as the primary carer. It doesn't happen because they become the primary carer because of that.
It makes it much harder for your oxytocin to catch up and for that alertness to come if you're forced back to work after 2 weeks, or you're never allowed to be in charge of your kids by yourself. I think also there can in couples be a bit of gatekeeping, and I see it, some mums who go out and it's well intentioned and it's only because they care, but they're checking their phone every 5 minutes to make sure the dad's put the baby to sleep. And it's like, he'll do it, just leave it to him. Or he doesn't need a list. And equally, some dads I know who will kind of phone their wife in a panic because they don't know where the socks are, or they can't pack the bag for school. And it's like, you're really accomplished in loads of areas of life, like back yourself. You can pack a bag, you're all right. It may feel like mum territory, but you can do it. Like, it's really not that hard. So I think it is about challenging those narratives.
Yeah, it's fascinating. How do you think we can go about that? What can we do? Are there any practical steps we can take?
I think society is already evolving. There's studies that show that dads already are much more likely than they used to be kind of primary carers, or to be the one that takes the time off work. There's much more noise about kind of childcare policy changing and helping mothers back to work. But I think as dads, we have to be quite vocal about it in the office, and it takes kind of senior men at work to be loud about the fact that they're leaving at 4 or 5 to pick up their kids, so that younger men at work know that that's not a shameful thing. We don't have to be ashamed of the fact that we have children. Like, you can still be as good at work, but also make those sacrifices as well. It's about things like, and this is happening already, but too slowly, things like when you're out and about in shopping centres, changing facilities, not just being in the women's toilets. Now, I've lost count of the number of times I've been in pubs and I've had to go into a women's toilet to change my son. And, that each time you see that, that's reinforcing the idea that women change nappies, men don't. And so there are all those kind of different parts of society that do need to evolve. One thing we got a lot of praise at doctor's appointments. Nurses saying, "Oh, it's brilliant to see a dad here at a vaccination appointment."
Really?
And we should be expecting dads to be there rather than kind of seeing it as this amazing, surprising thing.
Yeah, I read the report. They did a report on Prince Harry about his parenting style, and it's like it was highly praising of him changing nappies. And I just thought, well, I mean, that's
what
just
a great guy.
Well, I mean, I'm glad he does, but that's probably the least.
But nappies is a really good example of how society is already changing. Like, my dad's generation of men barely change nappies, whereas I feel like our generation of men, it would be quite embarrassing to admit that you've never changed a nappy. People would think, like, who the hell are you? What's wrong with you? That has just changed.
I find that strange. You see a lot of those memes, don't you? The videos and the memes that go around. And there was one particularly when my daughter was quite young, of a bloke who'd filmed himself changing a nappy and just gagging all the way through.
I can picture it. I've seen that one.
And it was like, well, I don't know what you're trying to prove here. You're trying to prove you can't change your own daughter's child, and you've filmed yourself doing that. And it's one of those, when those things go around, and it's also the memes which some dads groups that I expected better of send the memes going, when dad's left in charge. You just think, how's that helpful? Like, you must experience this diminishing of your role on a day-to-day basis. Why are you fueling that? I don't get it.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually reflect the reality of people's lives. I do think that even in like the most unequal relationships at home, dads now are expected to change nappies. I don't know any men that don't change nappies. So I also see that video and just think, it's like playing into a joke. It's like a really easy punchline, but actually it's not even reflective of the truth now.
No.
I mean, like maybe that guy just had a particularly bad gag reflex or something, or just particularly hated poo. But he, we're all just expected to see it. I didn't find nappy such a big deal. Like I don't know why people go on about it. You just like quickly change a nappy. But also the science shows that it's really good for kids, for babies, even from a really young age, to experience different caregivers, and it's to do with them learning empathy and that people are different. So their mum might change the nappy in quite a gentle way, and it feels really warm, and then the dad does it and it's a bit quicker, but he also has a toy. And what the scientists think is kind of somehow subconsciously that teaches babies that different people do different things, and I form different relationships with different people, and those are really important skills. And it's also reassuring when it comes to childcare. It's good for kids to experience different caretakers. So I don't think there should ever be any concern about mums not having all this time with babies. It's good for them. It's good for mums, it's good for dads, but it's also good for babies.
What sort of challenges do you face as a gay couple with a child than a straight couple with a child, or a straight man with a child out in public, do you think?
There are a few, but actually part of the reason I wrote this book, and part of the reason it's not a book specifically about being a gay dad, but just about being about fatherhood, and I guess just being any parent and trying to share the load, is because before we had Solly, we kind of assumed that would be more of a formative experience. There'd be quite a lot of homophobia, or we'd get quite a lot of funny questions. And actually the truth is we didn't get a lot of that. And I don't know if we live in a bubble or if that's just what people were like to our faces, but we go about the day in the normal way, and people don't make funny. We don't feel any different at all, really. But the experience that I kept facing is just this surprise that any dad was there, kind of gay or otherwise. Dad at a vaccination appointment. I had it a few months ago. I went to the chemist and picked up a prescription for my son, and there was kind of an old lady there, and I'm sure she meant really well, and she just said something like, "Oh, it's so nice to see dads doing things like this." I just thought, I'm picking up a prescription. Like they can't. Like, why are you praising me for this? Imagine a mum being praised for that. But in terms of the few things as gay dads, we have quite a funny one at the barber. It actually just happened the other day. We tried to get Solly's haircut at one of these kind of kids places with cars, and he just hated it. So we ended up just taking him to our local Turkish barber that we go to, and they're like lovely and they love him, but they get really kind of confused about what to say. And when we were there just now, one of the barbers was like saying to my son something like, "Oh, go to daddy. I mean, mummy. Oh, I don't know what." I was like, "I'm not mummy." He just wanted to say the right thing, and in his mind he was like, does this make him the baby's mum? Like, no.
He's doing child admin, so that sounds like a mum thing. Yeah,
exactly. It like really confused him, and I was like, no, we're both dads. And we had something quite early on. There was a cafe that we used to walk. It was lockdown when Solly was a new baby, and we'd kind of do a bit of a loop as a walk and go to a cafe. There was this woman out. I mean, she was chain smoking all the time, so we'd like be wheeling him away from her. But she, when she realised that we were both his dads, she was just like, no. She was like, no, I'll be his mum. We were like, firstly, get that cigarette away from our baby, and secondly, we're doing all right. Like, and I get it from my grandma. Will be like, oh, it's amazing, you've done this, you two. But she'd never say that about my sister. And she also wouldn't expect more of me at work than my sister. And that's kind of the crux of it.
So in a way, you don't want to be seen as unequal, but it's nice to get one over on your sister, right?
Yeah, exactly. We do benefit in quite a lot of ways from all the praise.
Yeah, of course. And also, you're head of investigations for the Times. You're a parent. You've written this book, and you've got half an hour for me to waste your time on this. How do you fit all that stuff in? I mean, I don't mean that. How does a man fit all that stuff in? But just that's a busy schedule, right, for any parent.
I do think if you can try and split it, and we don't have it perfect, and we argue about this all the time, and there'll be mates who'll be like, "What, you've done so much left." Look, and we have those arguments, my husband and I. But I do think if you both sacrifice a bit, you both gain a bit. And you can, that when you lay it out like that, that does sound like a lot. And I did have to take some annual leave to write the book and things like that. Solly's in nursery, quite long hours. We both work full time. That partly I think we don't feel guilt about that because he seems to love it, and also because I think we don't have kind of decades of mum guilt built up, or feeling of being a bad mum because we're not a mum, and we can just be a bit more practical about it and kind of think, screw it, he seems to be fine, he likes it, we're going to carry on. It is hard to balance it all, but yeah, I do think it really helps. Like both of our jobs, there are some times where I have to be away, and then Robin really steps up, and you are kind of, if you really trust your partner and you don't see them as a secondary partner, then when you go to work or go away, you don't spend the time worrying about them, and you can properly focus. And equally the other way around, Robin went to New York for a week for work, and it was hell, and I had to do everything on top of my job, but you get through it. And yeah, it's that kind of principle of, if you're both sacrificing a bit, you both gain from it as well.
And what do you think was your biggest takeaway from this research and writing of the book?
I think definitely the biggest takeaway is how important one-on-one time is. And it's to do with that back of the brain thing and feeling the weight of responsibility. I think lots of dads can end up in a bit of a supporting role and not packing the bags and not doing that stuff. And that's just really interesting. I spoke to a guy recently that I know who got divorced recently, and he was talking about, and some mums talk about this, and they say they get divorced and suddenly the dad stepped up and is so brilliant with the kids. And it's like, well, before we were allowing him the space to do it on his own. And actually, divorced dads, they might have the kids less, but when they're with them, they have them for the weekend, just them, and they're making all the decisions. And lo and behold, the child doesn't die, the child's fine. And that one-on-one time is also really good for kind of deep relationships, forming your own bonds. And you don't have to be exactly the same parent. You might cook different things, you might do different games. One of you might be really physical, and the other one might like doing painting with them. And I think you kind of need a space as a parent. At the beginning, we definitely try to do everything as a family, and more now we're both kind of taking one-on-one time with him, or one of us will take him to an activity and the other one will have a bit of chill out time, and we're realizing that's really important. And that's a really important part of sharing the load, I think. And
yeah, embracing that people parent in different ways is something that I don't think I'd ever really thought about as a concept. I guess it's kind of subconscious, but it's important, isn't it, that parents are different, and parents, even within the same family, parent in a different way. And
yeah, and women give birth, and then they have the time off initially, so they form their own ways of doing things, and then you can get into a habit. I think I've heard this from speaking to lots of people, where like she's worked out how to put the baby to bed, and so then the dad feels no confidence in it, and then she ends up doing it more and more, and she's doing it by breastfeeding it. Actually, it's really important that the dad forms his own ways of doing this stuff, and that also the mum, if there's a mum and dad, trusts him and is like, and you know what, sometimes I think partly because I went first on parental leave, I could be a bit like that with Robin. I'd be like, no, you do it this way, or and we realised quite quickly that sometimes I just needed to bugger off, and if I just went for a walk, he'd put me to sleep.
Yeah,
and actually, because it stopped me jumping in when it was getting a bit stressful. And we definitely are at a place now where we do things differently. And it's helped with writing my book, actually, learning that not only is that a good thing for us, but that is genuinely a good thing for a kid.
Brilliant. So the book is The Equal Parent.
Yeah.
It's available.
I've got a copy here.
Oh, well, yeah, show it to the screen.
Oh,
there we go. Oh, it's all right. I tell you what I'll do is I'll get a picture and I'll overlay it on here, like technology and stuff.
Sounds good.
But yeah, it's been brilliant to chat to you. Thank you so much, Paul. It's absolutely fascinating, and thank you for writing that book.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
And it turns out that you can't put a little thing over a video that's playing, but you can do that now and show Paul's amazing book, The Equal Parent by Paul Morgan-Bentley, which is available from all good bookshops, probably some rubbish ones as well, but definitely from bookshops. And I thought he was a fascinating man, and you can hear that interview again on the podcast, which we do, the Dadless Soul Sessions podcast, if you missed any of it, or you could just rewind this video and go back and listen from the top. Next month, we've got Susie Karlik, who's going to be here talking about self-defense, how we can support women and girls in safety and self-defense, which I think will be fascinating. It'll be a completely different conversation, but another worthwhile one. And that's what we want to do on the Dadless Soul Session. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'll see you on the last Thursday of April.